I'm Rob Followell, the CEO of the Followell Company, and welcome to our Ignite Leadership podcast. Our special guest today is Kyle DeFur. As president of trueU, an Indianapolis-based nonprofit organization, Kyle leads a movement of over 70 like-minded businesses that believe that great companies make their people better. trueU provides a proven platform of programs and resources to help member company employees be the best version of themselves at work, at home, and in their communities. Prior to leading trueU, Kyle held executive leadership positions in hospital administration for over 25 years. He most recently served for 7 years as the president of St.Vincent Indianapolis Hospital, a 950-bed, $1.3 billion hospital organization in Indianapolis with more than 5,500 employees and 1,500 physicians. Hospital responsibilities included St. Vincent Indianapolis Acute Hospital, St. Vincent Women's Hospital, Peyton Manning Children's Hospital, Seton Hall Specialty Hospital, and St. Vincent Stress Center. During his tenure at St. Vincent Indianapolis, Kyle received the Regents Award for Leadership and Innovation from the American College of Healthcare Executives. And the hospital received national recognition as one of America's best hospitals by USA News and World Report, and one of the top 50 hospitals in the country by Becker's Hospital Review. Kyle graduated from Anderson University in Indiana with a bachelor's degree, then went on to get his master's degree in hospital and health administration and business administration from Xavier University in Cincinnati. Kyle serves on the boards of Anderson University, Rotary Club of Indianapolis, Sheltering Wings, A Heart for Kids, and Anderson First Church of the Nazarene. He and his wife of more than 30 years, Dana, have two grown sons, Cameron and Clayton. And when not working, Kyle enjoys mentoring, reading, golfing, and actively serving his church. It is with my great pleasure that I welcome today to our podcast, Kyle DeFur. Well, welcome, Kyle. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity, Rob.
I gave a little bit of your background in the introduction. What I failed to mention, most people that listen to the podcast, they know me. That's how they got to the podcast, and they know that I had a 25-year career myself as a hospital executive. And some of them may know, most probably do not, that I was a social worker prior to getting my master's in health administration. And very, very few know that the person who influenced me and led me to move from social work into health administration is you. And while I was completing my undergraduate there in Lexington, I was working at an entry-level position in Lexington at Charter Hospital. And Jack Wheatley was the CEO, and the COO was none other than you. And you took me under your wing back then. I know I asked you lots of questions, and you allowed me to pester you and from time to time, and you spent time with me. And then you were promoted to another facility as CEO. And if I remember correctly, you actually never opened that. It was in the transition for Charter. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that. And yeah, I lost touch with you in that process, and 25 years went by. I was able to keep up with Jack a little bit. And I happened to open a Becker's, I think it was Becker's Healthcare Review. And when I was CEO in Knoxville and looking at the 40 people you must know in healthcare, and there's your name. And I thought, surely there can't be two of you, and picked up the phone, called your assistant and got you. And I'll tell this story on you. At least this is the way I remember it. You answered the phone and I said, Kyle, you may not remember me. My name's Rob Followell. And I told you the story, and you said, of course I remember you. And it's people like you that make such a difference in people's lives. And on this podcast, I always talk about we all have mentors, and we owe a great debt of gratitude. And I owe that debt of gratitude to you. You truly took me when I was at the lowest position in the organization. I think I was PRN, and took me under your wing. And wow, what a difference that made in my life. You changed the trajectory of my career and ultimately, my life. I spent 25 years roaming the country as a COO or a CEO. And now, I guess I've somewhat followed in your footsteps again. So thank you. Thank you so much for the difference you made in my life. And you never really know the difference. Again, it went many years without us speaking, probably 25. And you don't know the difference that you made in hundreds of other people, because I paid that forward to a whole lot of other people along the way. So,
Robert, thanks so much for sharing that. That's really a humbling story to hear. And I'll share something with you as well. When you called me that we hadn't talked in 25 years, right? So you called me that one day. That day was probably the most discouraged I had been in my 25 years of my healthcare career.
Wow.
It was a tough day. We've all had them, right? You've had those days, and just a whole series of things that day was a really difficult day. And I walked out of the hospital that day feeling really discouraged and down and questioning myself. And I left, and I had this message in my hand, to call Rob Followell. So on the way home, I picked up the phone and I called you, and you shared, just some of what you just shared right here. And it encouraged me in such a way. And it was, I went home and told my wife, I said, I had a God moment today. That Rob called me 25 years after we had an initial conversation and spoke a word of encouragement and gratitude and thanksgiving to me when I needed it the most. And I'll never forget that.
Wow. God is good.
Yes.
God is good.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us about your career. How'd you get where you are, and fill in the gaps?
So like you, I was in healthcare administration, hospital administration for 25 years, and was very thankful for the opportunities that I had in healthcare. And my last position in hospital administration was president of St.Vincent Indianapolis Hospital in Indianapolis, which is a $1.2 billion healthcare system with over 700 beds. And the Peyton Children's Hospital is a part of that, and St. Vincent Women's Hospital, and a level 1 trauma facility now, and a tertiary quaternary facility, and 5,000 employees and over 1,500 physicians. It was a big operation, and I'd been in that role for just about 7 years prior to leaving to what I'm doing now. And, I'd been in healthcare 25 years and enjoyed it, and was very grateful for the opportunities I'd had to be in healthcare. And but probably about a year and a half before I left St. Vincent, I had done some soul searching and asking the question. I've done this for 25 years. I could continue doing it another 15 years or so. But if I wasn't doing this, what would I do? And it was an interesting question for me. And it led me down this path of doing some soul searching around what is it that I'm good at? What is it that I enjoy doing? What is it that I think I'm designed to do, the kind of work that I'm designed to do? And after reading some books and asking myself a lot of questions, I really settled on, I loved mentoring young leaders. That was a real passion that I had. I loved building healthy cultures in companies, and I loved connecting purpose to work. So it wasn't just a job, but it was really, there was a greater purpose in the work that we did. And so I remember reflecting on that and saying, okay, well, I do that at the hospital now. But I remember thinking, if I ever had the chance to do exclusively that would be really cool. And long story short, about a year later, I had the opportunity. I found out about this new organization that was starting here in Indianapolis. The business owner had a vision for this organization called trueU that was really about mentoring young leaders, building healthy cultures, and creating purpose, connecting the dots related to purpose and work. And so I made the decision to leave what I was doing in healthcare. And a few months after I left, I decided to engage in this opportunity with trueU, and have been here now a little over 6 years.
Wow. Awesome. Tell us a little bit about your, I know you're married and have 2 grown sons. What do you said, I think I said in the intro that you like to golf, you like to read. Anything else you want to add to that?
Now I'm very, this past week, actually, my wife, Dana, and I celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary. So
Congratulations.
really, really thankful for her and blessed. What a wonderful wife she is. And we're just enjoying life together. I have two sons and two wonderful daughter-in-laws as well, and two grandsons. And so one of those sons and our daughter-in-law lives in New York City, and the other lives here in Indianapolis.
Well, I really want to get to the part about leadership. I want to talk to you about leadership. But before we jump to that, I want to ask a question that I ask a lot of guests, particularly right now. Our environment is constantly changing, and healthcare is constantly changing. And when I first started asking that question, we hadn't even thought about COVID. Now with COVID, holy moly, healthcare has changed. It's upside down. So what do you see in the next 10 years for healthcare? And then we'll move on to the leadership piece of things.
It's interesting, Rob, whenever there's tremendous change, there's tremendous opportunity. And, the deck gets shuffled. We think we understand how the game's played, or we understand how things operate and the different relationships. And healthcare, by definition, is just so complex. I mean, it really is. It's very, very complex. But if you've been in healthcare for a number of years, you've had a sense for the way that the healthcare system works and operates, and a lot of innovation, a lot of things going on in healthcare to fix what's, in my opinion, a pretty broken system. But a lot of good work is being done to correct that. I think that what's happened though in the last year and a half with COVID and how people are thinking about accessing healthcare and telemedicine, it's changing probably at a more rapid rate now than it has in the past. And the key, I think, is really digging in and being extremely curious around what is it going to look like 3 years from now, and how can we make it look different 3 years from now? What are the things that we've learned? Obviously we've had some really painful lessons, and I can't tell you how many people in the last couple of years have asked me, so are you glad you're out of healthcare with all that's going on in the last few years? And I always say, I didn't leave healthcare because I didn't like healthcare. I left healthcare because I felt called to this other work that I'm doing now. But the beauty of healthcare is you have what always inspired me was you have people who it's their life's work, right? I mean, you talk about dedication, 24/7, whatever it takes, we're going to get the patient's needs met, right? And taking that same level of dedication and focusing on innovation, and I think what's happening with telemedicine, nobody would have dreamed would have happened in the last year, right. But the circumstances, the environment forced us into that. But there's opportunities in that, and I think that's going to be significant as we move forward in healthcare. What we're really going to need in terms of bricks and mortar, and versus what can be done remotely, I think is really going to be significant. And then all the technology, as well. The technology that you wear, the monitoring of vital signs and all those kinds of things that can be done now is pretty exciting stuff.
I couldn't agree more. I asked this of virtually every guest, and I guess it rings true because I know, I've had so many mistakes that I've made in my career and didn't live up to my own expectations or those of others. But tell us about, and when we talk about that, it just brings it back to our listeners that none of us are perfect. And it is oftentimes those moments that we mess up, that we don't live up to expectations. If we take the time to slow down and reflect, that we grow the most. Can you share a time like that in your career where it didn't go as planned and what you learned from it?
Yeah, a couple. I guess one, when I think of my time in healthcare, I think of one particular situation where I had been in some conversations with a physician group around partnering, and another group came into the picture, and I won't go into all the details, but the other group ended up being identified as a group to work with, and I just hated have the conversation with the group that was not the one that was selected, that was involved. And I put off that communication. I put off that conversation. I knew it was going to be a hard conversation. They were an important group. I thought highly of them, and I just avoided it. I just avoided having the difficult conversation until they came and said, "We've heard this. Is this true?" And then I had the conversation, but they were disappointed that they had to hear it from someone else other than me. We'd have some conversations. I was embarrassed that I hadn't had that conversation with them. And I remember when they left, I just had that pit in my stomach, right? I did not handle that well. I think I've lost some integrity with them. And it really was because the reflection was I needed more courage to do the right thing, right? And it was a painful lesson, but one that I thought I don't ever want to be in this position again. And it's going to be uncomfortable no matter what. Let's make it uncomfortable because I was doing the right thing versus backpedaling and then them questioning if I'm really trustworthy, moving forward. And so that was a difficult lesson for me. Another one, I would say that when I came to trueU and it's a small nonprofit organization, and it was getting companies to become members of trueU to grow their culture and grow their people. I kind of had an assumption in my mind that I would be really good at selling and engaging prospective companies to join the trueU community. And after about 6 months, I realized I'm not very good at this. and it was humbling for me because I thought I would be, and I really wasn't. And just, I was naive in the sense that there's a whole, science to selling and listening more than you talk and asking the right questions and identifying pain points and all those kinds of things. So I thought, I need to get a coach. And I got a coach, to help me through that process, which was very helpful for me. But I had expectations and thought I could do it. I could wing it and could do well, but realized I was overstating my expectations.
Boy, your stories certainly ring very close to home for me. That's for sure.
Yeah,
very close. So, talk to us about some of those leadership. I mean, you've had a great career, and you have mentored and led some incredible organizations. Tell us about some of those leadership principles that really mean something to you. I know you're a servant leader, so talk to us about those.
When I was in Lexington, Kentucky, where you were at Charter Ridge Hospital, I had the opportunity. There was an organization called Leadership Lexington Academy. Most cities have those, or kind of city-based leadership programs, and I had the opportunity to go through it. At one of those sessions, they showed a video by Lou Holtz called "Do Right." And Lou Holtz, many of you, the listeners, probably are familiar with him, but he's a football coach that was renowned for he had taken program after program after program that was upside down. And, within a couple of years, he would have them as nationally ranked teams or even winning national championships. And so he had this track record of incredible success as a leader. And he shared in this video, and it impacted me in such a powerful way that I remembered it. From that position, it was really my first job out of graduate school. And he said, there's 3 rules to live by: do right, do your best, and treat the people like you want to be treated. Right? It's very simple, very basic. In fact, when he talked about it, he said, I'm almost embarrassed to say what they are because they're so basic. He said, but do the right thing, do your best, and treat other people like you want to be treated. And then he said, be aware that we all subconsciously ask 3 questions of each other. We don't do it consciously, but subconsciously we ask 3 questions of each other. And based on the answer to these 3 questions, we'll determine whether you're going to be a person of influence or not, whether you're going to be a leader or not. And defining a leader as somebody who's a person of influence, right? And so he said, those 3 questions are you committed to excellence? The second one is, can I trust you? And then the third one is, do you care about me as a person? Not just for the work that I do, but do you care about me as a person? And I wrote those down. And leadership can be kind of complex. There's a gazillion books out there, right, on how to be a good leader. But I have used those 3 and gone back to those 3 time and time again. And, when you think of those three questions, are you committed to excellence? Can I trust you? And do you care about me as a person? And you think of, who's the best leader you ever worked for? Who was the best person that you've ever worked for? And you ask those three questions. Were they committed to excellence? Were they trustworthy? And did they care about me as a person? I bet all three of those are yes in your mind, right? And then you think of people that you did not enjoy working for. We've all had them, right? You ask those same three questions. And I bet at least one of those, if not more than one of those, is a no.
Yeah.
And so, I learned to take those three questions and now, and I have for many years, when I start working with someone, I say, here's three questions that I'm going to ask of you. And here's three questions you're going to ask of me. And I want to live up to these three questions. And if I'm not, I'm giving you permission to tell me that I'm not living up to them. I'm not perfect. I'm going to fall short sometime, but I give you permission to hold me accountable to these three questions, because that's really what I want. I want to live up to that. And when I've been in a leadership position and realize that there's somebody on my team that seems disengaged or maybe isn't making eye contact or something's just not right with them, I think to myself, if I demonstrated to this person that I'm committed to excellence, that I'm trustworthy, and I care about them as a person, and usually it's in one of those three areas where they've got a disconnect with me. And so I start asking questions around those three areas and identify where it is and ask forgiveness if I need to. But that's really been helpful for me when you ask about what's a framework that you use from a leadership perspective. That's what I've used, and I found it to be very, very, very accurate.
That's fantastic. And wow, Lou Holtz, what a difference he's made in so many people's lives, not only on the football field, but off the field too. So
Absolutely.
Just like you. If you could describe yourself, or I'm going to ask you to pin down one word that would describe you, be your motto, whatever. What would that one word be?
The one word, and I'll take a step back here. So when I was going through the process of making the decision to move from healthcare into the work that I'm doing now, I had to ask myself, what does it mean for me to be successful? Right? Because I was in a position that was, president of a large hospital, large health system. I was making really good money. And the things that oftentimes people look toward defining of success, I had some of those things, right? And yet I was thinking about leaving that and going and doing something for a small nonprofit that would be risky, that may or may not be successful. And I had to ask myself, well, what does it mean for you to be successful? What are the filters that I'm using? What are the criteria that I'm using to make this decision to leave what I'm doing to go do something else like this? And I thought, well, and so I really did start asking myself, how do you define success? What does it mean for Kyle DeFur to be successful? And when I'm 85 years old and sitting on the porch and I look back at my life, how am I going to know if I lived a life that I think was a good life to live? And ultimately, Rob, from my perspective, my faith is very important to me. And I walk on a daily basis, even moment by moment basis, in this faith adventure that I have. And it means more to me than I can put into words. But ultimately, my definition of success was being joyfully obedient to what I understand God's will to be. Right. And that's what success is. And so as I go through my life and I think through, being faithful to that, if you say one word, I would say be faithful to that, being joyfully obedient, not reluctantly obedient, but joyfully obedient to what I understand God's will to be at that time.
Awesome. Well, I think if we could all live up to that standard, the world would certainly be a better place. And I'll tell you a story that I didn't anticipate sharing, but in the journey that I've made in that transition, just like you, and oftentimes you question yourself. I went through that same sales experience that you did. And I was having a conversation with my oldest son one day. He lives in the Knoxville, Tennessee area, Oak Ridge area. And he was here visiting with us. And he said, Dad, I feel like I got my dad back.
Mm.
Oh, and when he told me that, it's like, okay, God, I'm on the right path. So it's good stuff.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Well, so you talked about some of those things that you've learned, those mentors that have been out there for you over time. What did you learn from them? Sometimes people want to share the mentors, sometimes that they're afraid to, but who were some of those, or what are those lessons that you learned from them along the way?
You know, one of the things that I started a number of years ago is I have a Word document that's called What I Learned Today. And I just write. I don't write it every day, but most days I do. I'm every day intentional about trying to listen and learn from others. And so I'll just document, next bullet point, what I learned today. So I've had a lot of people who have I've learned so much from, but people I've worked with and worked for, they'll share some insight that I say, oh, I don't want to miss that. I don't want to forget that. Or sometimes I'll observe something and think, oh, I don't want to, that was a mistake they just made that I don't want to make that mistake. So we learn both ways. But, I think of some of the people that I work for, going back to Lexington, where you and I worked together. Judy House was the CEO there, and she was very action oriented, and she was always prepared. She was always prepared. I'll tell you a funny story with her. When one day I was in her office, and the head of food services came in, and he had a big piece of chocolate cake. He knew Judy liked chocolate cake. And he walked in with this big piece of chocolate cake and says, Judy, I got something for you. She goes, oh, come on in. And she set it down at his desk, and she opened her drawer and she pulled out a fork. And I said, Judy, I said, do you always keep a fork in your drawer? And she said, Kyle, one of the first lessons of leadership you need to learn is always be prepared for any opportunity that may present itself.
I love it.
And she was always prepared. She was extremely prepared, and she was very action oriented as well. And so that's a couple of things I took away from Judy. There's another guy that I worked for at a hospital in Anderson, Indiana, Jerry Brummett. And Jerry taught me about the power in believing in your people, and in seeing potential in people and raising the bar with them. So Jerry called me into his office one day, and he said, Kyle, what do you want to do with your career? What do you want to, at that time, I was a vice president of operations. Well, actually, I wasn't vice president of operations. I was executive director of a psychiatric facility, executive director of a facility the hospital system owned. And I said, I don't know, I ever thought about it. I think maybe a vice president of a general hospital would be really neat to be in that role. And he said, Kyle, he said, you have the potential to be the CEO of this hospital someday. And if you want to do it, I'm happy to work with you along. You got to decide if you want it, if that's something you want to do. It'll take some work, some things you need to work on. He said, but you could be the CEO of this hospital someday. And I remember I walked out of his office and I thought, wow. And the truth is, and I've learned this over time, is that's really the role of leaders, is to see potential in people and help them cast a vision, maybe even beyond where they see themselves, what they can see themselves. And he did that for me. And I've taken great pleasure over the years in looking for that and identifying those people who have great potential, speaking that truth and that vision into their lives. That they can be maybe even more than what they think that they could be at that time. That was a great gift from Jerry that he shared with me. The other person I would mention is Vince Capone, and Vince was CEO of St.Vincent Health. And I had a really difficult physician issue, and he was CEO of the health system. And I was president of one of the hospitals within the system, and this physician was thinking about leaving, and he was one of the top 10 physicians in our health system that we did not want to leave. And he wanted some assurances from the health system regarding some issues. And I had talked to him, and I felt it would be really good to bring in, the CEO of the health system, to have that conversation with him too. And as we wanted him to stay. And so we met with that physician and had the conversation, and we left the meeting not knowing where it was going to go. He listened to us and listened to Vince and listened to me. But as we went back outside and we were walking across the parking lot, Vince said to me, he says, Kyle, he said, in leadership, he says, we do our best. That's all we can do. We just do our best, and just know that the outcome is in God's hands, right? It's going to be okay. It's just part of our faith journey. And, there's certain things you can't control, how the people are going to respond to things. You just do your best, and the chips will fall where they may, but it's in God's hands. And that's part of our faith journey as leaders. And that was a great gift that he shared with me as well.
If you had the opportunity, and again, this is one of those questions that I ask virtually everybody. I love the response too that I get. If you had that opportunity to look back at a younger Kyle, knowing what you know now, and give yourself advice 25 years ago or more, what advice would you give?
That's an interesting question. I think it would be to not fear the future, to trust and enjoy the journey. It's going to be okay. And similarly, as Vince, Capone had shared with me, that's really taking that and applying it. I think over time in our lives, hopefully, as we age, we begin to learn and trust and know that we've had enough life experience to know that things do end up turning out okay. It's going to be all right. But man, in your 20s, that's tough. That's tough to embrace. You just don't know, right? And the stakes feel really, really high. And so I think that to not fear, but to trust and to know that ultimately it's going to be okay.
Are there books, quotes that really are meaningful to you that you want to share with the podcast listeners?
I have actually behind me here, I have a books that have been really impactful in my life. And those are books I keep front and center because each one of them taught me a lesson or two that I never want to forget. And so, I've got a number of books that have been a great value to me. A couple of them I'll mention. Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller. It's connecting and understanding the design of work and connecting our work to God's work and how those dots are connected. It was a real important piece for me in understanding the theology of work. Another great book is called Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. And he's acknowledging that life is cyclical, and there's a beginning and ending to just, it's about everything in our lives. And the book is written really on the premise that a lot of people don't expect things to end. They expect them to go on forever. And if we're wise, we look for those endings, we anticipate those endings, and then we focus on ending well so that we can start something new. And people oftentimes get stuck in the ending, or they're surprised by an ending, and it takes them a long time to get over it. And so just acknowledging that life is a series of beginnings and endings, and to not be surprised by the endings, to look for them, and then to really focus on ending well. Great resource. And then another book, which I think is so applicable today, is called Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. I say there's two kinds of people, in the world. Those who are addicted to their phones, and those who are in denial that they're addicted to their phones. And so this really gets to that issue of understanding that dynamic in our lives, and how do we minimize the impact of that on us. A fascinating book that has been really helpful to me in learning how to focus and not get so distracted by the things by the technology that we have in our world today.
You've told us a whole lot about, where you're going, where you've been, but touch a little bit on what you feel like the next chapter is. And I think I know the answer based on what you said, but what's next for you?
I have a great passion around generosity. And as I've learned, again, getting back to that, what's the definition of success, and what does it mean to live the life that's truly life? What does it mean to live a rich life? And it's counterintuitive to what our culture would tell us. And as Jesus said, it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. And that's true. It's just true. I've heard this said recently, which I thought was so good. It said, I've never known a generous person who wasn't happy. I've never known a generous person that wasn't happy. And so my wife and I, we about 3 or 4 years ago, set up a donor advised fund, a giving fund through the National Christian Foundation. And we're just having a lot of fun being generous and
Awesome.
giving and focusing not on building our net worth, but really focusing on kingdom impact and identifying what is it that we need and what can we do to come alongside others and support others. And so that's the journey that we're on, and we're really
Awesome.
excited about where that's going to go.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about what you're doing there. If people want to learn more about you and about your organization, how can they find out more about you?
Yeah, so go to LinkedIn, Kyle DeFur on LinkedIn, or you can go to our website at trueU, trueU.com, TRUE, and the letter U.com. And I really haven't talked much about trueU here, but to say it's a fantastic organization that is focused on helping companies create great cultures in their organizations and helping companies to really focus on growing their people personally as well as professionally. And so we have 70 plus companies that are part of trueU, and the great values, these companies are coming together and sharing with each other how they're doing it. How are they creating great cultures? How are they growing their people personally as well as professionally? It's really a movement of companies who are really focused on making an impact. And I say that the CEOs of these trueU member companies, they want to hear their people say, I'm a better person because I work in this company, right? And they want to provide that so they want to grow. They're all growth-oriented companies, but they also are very focused on their culture, and they want to be proud of their culture. And it's an inspiring group to be with. If you'd like to learn more about trueU, be sure to go to the trueU.com website.
Awesome. Anything else that you want to share with the listening audience?
Rob, thanks so much for the opportunity to be on the show today. And congrats to you for the great work that you're doing and for your heart growing leaders. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you did for me. I mean, again, I was at the lowest level of the organization and you took me under your wing, and wow, what a difference it made. So
no, it was my honor.
Well, thank you, Kyle. This is Rob Followell for the Followell Company and the Ignite Leadership podcast series saying, make it a great day.